want to start with is we recently did a list on our channel as far as the top 10 directors we want to see do a live action film. You're so in this world, and just listening to you in there, you're a diehard fan, obviously that's why you're doing this as well. Is a live action film, an anthology film, something that you've ever wanted to tackle or been discussed?
Well, I'm a terrible liar, so let's just start with that. I would say that it's something that does greatly interest me. It's something that I've thought about, and in some ways I see it as a natural evolution of everything I've been learning working on Star Wars, which is George taught me in much more of a live action sensibility, because that's what he is. Right. And a lot of the techniques I've used over the years to film, and with the way we did the CG shooting coverage and whatnot, the language of it, the editing style of it, is all very similar. And so I've been in a very fortunate situation to be able to watch at times these great filmmakers we've brought in to do the movies work, to familiarize myself with what they do. So, is that happening? No, I'm not going to say that's happening. Is it interesting to me? It's absolutely interesting to me. There probably wouldn't be a better situation for me having someone like Kathy Kennedy around and a great story team like we have at Lucasfilm. But right now, my focus is so much on the animated world that we're doing, because I see it personally as not just being Rebels. My hope is that we can eventually expand out and tell multiple stories that are happening in animation. Animation has so many different styles and techniques that you can use. I feel like we've always just scratched the surface. So to me, it's like, what kind of story do I want to tell, and who are the characters in it? And then, there's a wide variety of even animation styles that we could still, in the years to come, exploit to tell stories. But I do think, just on a completely fantasy level for myself, that if I was able to in some way breathe, live action life into some of the characters I created in animation, that it would be, really exciting for the fans that grew up with it. So you never know.
You said so much in there. I wish I had you for 2 hours. One thing you mentioned, you said it's a celebration to how close you are to Pablo Hidalgo and Leland right in your office. So, and I'm sure I can just imagine in my fanboy the conversations that are going on. And something you said in the conference about the story development that's going to happen in season 2. Mm-hmm. Now, what I'm curious about is, I've read everything. I'm up on the comics, on the novels, and you mentioned Hera and Kanan. Mm-hmm. A New Dawn was the first novel that came out, and I want to know: is there going to be any reference to Count Vidian? Is there going to be any reference to when they first met? Will there be stuff that comes from the novels and the comics that transfers into the animation?
That's always possible. I can't think to cite something specifically, except that when they go to do a novel, we'll give them kind of like a big, broad spectrum. Okay, well, this is what we think Kanan and Hera are doing as far as where they're at personality-wise, emotionally, interest-wise. You have to let everybody creatively do their thing. You have to let them be creative, right. So they do come up with a lot of their own material, and wonderfully so. I think especially Greg Weisman's Kanan comic book has been fantastic. And of course, I had a double interest there, because not only was he writing about Kanan, he's writing about clones. And I'm like, whoa.
And there's an arc with all the characters as well, too.
Right.
Series. Right.
So I know, all about that. So, and Greg was great. And I think you can tell when you read the stuff that it is connected. It's just, I was describing this to someone earlier, a lot of the integration and crossover where I see what's happening in the films, and I meet the directors and talk to them, or I talk to Kathy about stuff for Kiri Hart, whether it be the look of how Rebels is on Infinities, the game, or whether it's a comic book or a movie. A lot of it is about just being informed so that we can keep everything we're doing special. It's not always so much about placing Easter eggs, but it's about knowing, okay, they're going to that kind of planet, we don't want to do that, we need to go do this. Oh, you're covering that part of that relationship? Okay, then we're going to do this over here. But now we know that and we can apply that. It's about awareness. It's not just always about, that poster in the background has Ben Quadraneros in it. It's so that everybody is aware of the history of this galaxy that we all love so much, so that we're keeping each story unique and special for the audience, and that's a big part of it.
Is it more difficult, though, because you had mentioned, again, in the press conference, that in the Clone Wars, you could take stuff from Legends, like you made Darth Bane canon. Thank you for that, by the way. And you were at one point going to be Darth Revan in there. But you guys were the only game in town at that time. So you were able to pull these things, make them canon. Now it's not necessarily pulling, you can pull things from Legends obviously, but now when you're pulling things from the new canon, it's history. So do you have to, is it overwhelming, that stuff as well too?
It's honestly not very different from how I worked before. You know, my main concentration, of course, the stories I'm telling in the films. I think what we're more careful about, as you noted, is before we were the only thing really happening in canon when we did Clone Wars. Now you do have to say, is anybody doing anything with that? No. Okay. Can we put flags around that so we have that? So cool. When we're ready, we can get there. And everybody's pretty good at doing that. And you know, you just hope when there's an idea, sometimes you'll go meet with the people doing that idea and say, hey, I don't know what you're doing, but I had these thoughts. Right. So these are just my thoughts on it. And you kind of work that way. But, you know, as long as the story group is aware through Kiri Hart of what's happening, you know, like my office is right next to hers. And I say, Kiri, I want to do this thing with so-and-so. Oh, okay, well, that'll work. Off I go. Right. So, excuse me, in that regard, it's very similar to how I've always worked.
So speaking of Kiri Hart, she had also mentioned, too, and I'm not going to ask you for story details, but she had mentioned that it's possible that you guys were aware that the timeline of Rebels is going to coincide with Rogue One, because the way you guys are timing it out now, because I assume and that's another thing is how many more episodes you're doing now. I assume, do you know when this season ends? Like I don't mean this for a story point. I mean as far as actual date, because I'm curious. Season 3, I assume would loop up right to where Rogue One is. Obviously, you're very aware of that. Like, if you had if you could, I'm trying to word this the best way that way I know you can't give me anything. Is there something that any one of these characters that you would like to see in the live action world?
Sure.
Like Cad Bane, maybe anybody that might pop up, anyone along those lines.
You know, those are always possibilities. I think what's most important is that we are aware of all the release dates. Yeah. So, you know, we don't want to precede the films with something that would undercut, again, how special they need to be in that moment. Once they're out, there's more opportunity then to say, okay, well, let's bring that element in. Now everybody knows about that. We can tell an earlier part of that story in Rebels. So we do strategize around that, but most of the time we're serving the character arcs in Rebels. You know, it's just a fun thing to know that, you know, there's these big films happening and there's always opportunities. So you can bug them and be like, hey, maybe, you know, use this guy. And I'm always the most open about it, in all honesty. It's outside of Ahsoka. Ahsoka's the only character that, if anybody wanted to do something with that character, I would be like, I need to be involved. I need to be directly involved. I don't know.
I think that's a Sith plot right there. I think you're right. I'm just telling you my prediction here before I let you go here.
Go ahead.
Vader, when he went up against Kanan and Ezra, it was like Tyson in '86.
Right.
You don't get in the ring with him.
Not even close.
Don't even get in the ring with him. Yeah. But when Ahsoka knows a little bit more about him, I think she's maybe what I think her arc is that she's trying to figure it out. And when that final battle comes, I love Ahsoka, but I don't think she's making it out. I just wanted to tell you my predictions.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, I think the details are all in right. How does it happen? If it happens, and you know, it's a challenging thing. Again, you have to somehow tell this story. You would never want to undercut Vader, and you know, I've always said that. Like, I don't really ever want Ahsoka's story to be that in the end she just turned out to be another element that drove Anakin to the dark side. I think she deserves more than that. She should stand on her own right as a character. But she has this great connection to Anakin Skywalker. In a lot of ways, she's become a vessel for what was the good parts of Anakin Skywalker, because her maintaining the Jedi way, at least as far as she practices it, maintains a lot of his teachings, you know, within her. So what that tells you, though, is that Darth Vader would want to desperately destroy that because of his guilt and shame around who he was and what happened, the death of Padme and everything. He would want to crush Ahsoka. Some people live in a fantasy world where they could somehow be friends, and I don't see that as a possibility, because it's really Luke's job spark that hope in his father, you know. So otherwise, you know, it's going to be an intense season.
And thank you for that. Thank you for joining me today. And
No
thank you
problem.
for everything you've done for Star Wars fans in general.
thank
Really,
you.
really appreciate it. Thanks,
My
Dave.
pleasure.
All right. See you soon.
See you, man.